Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does that message mean something up there, Hillary?
Yeah.
All right, first up on our agenda, we have Amy Quessel and Jim Kupfer. Hello, Jim. Hello, Amy.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Looking all nice and cozy in the comforts of your home.
Hello.
I'll turn it over to you guys.
Jim, do you want to describe what's going on?
Sure, yeah, I can start describing, and Amy, please, I know you guys have been dealing with this with probably every town, so you're probably well versed at this. I can give high level, and then Amy, if you want to fill in details, that would be great. So the state, for many years, the state has been really looking at ways to improve the zoning act. So what we utilize under Mass General Law 40A for our zoning, to basically promote housing, and a way to build more housing in Massachusetts. And finally, in 2021, the state did in fact pass Mass General Law 40A Section 3A of the Zoning Act, which requires that an MBA community shall have at least one zoning district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right and meets certain criteria. So when this was originally passed, that word reasonable size, I think every community kind of threw up their hands and said, well, what does that in fact mean? I know I reached out to Amy and said, what does that mean? And she said, hold tight, we're going to try and figure out more. So now that has been clarified. So Bellingham is an MBTA adjacent community, which means that you have a commuter rail station near you, but not in your community. And so with that designation, that requires for Bellingham to still follow the new law of 40A 3A, but it requires slightly less density than that of those folks that are inwards towards Boston. That doesn't mean it's less density than what we're used to. I'll get to that in a minute, but it's pretty dense for Bellingham, nothing that we've really seen to date. So what it requires is a minimum gross density, and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre and a minimum district capacity of 750 units. So that density capacity or district capacity is, we need to identify an area of town that's a half a mile from a commuter rail station, or as close as reasonably possible, to promote housing. So it would be a zoning district, potentially like an overlay district that I know the board is fairly familiar with, that would allow for 15 units per acre with a minimum of 750 units. That doesn't mean that the town has to permit and have constructed 750 units, but an area which it can reasonably be built. And it also cannot have age restriction, so it needs to be suitable for families and children. Let's see, so the reason we're talking about it today is the first step in the law is, or the guidelines from the Department of Housing and Community Development, is that the town must serve notice essentially to the select board here in Bellingham that this is happening and we need to plan for it. And we needed to do it, I believe, before the middle of March. And so that's why I reached out to Dennis and if we could go ahead and get that going. So basically from here, I would notify DHCD that I've notified you of this new law. And so the timeline to implement from there though, so we need to notify DHCD. And then from there, we need to adopt an action plan. And that action plan needs to be adopted by July 1st of 2023. And that action plan needs to spell out a way in which you're going to adopt zoning to meet the guidelines by the end of the year in 2024. ramifications if you don't do it. MBTA community that fails to comply with the section will not be eligible for funds. Right now, they're identifying Housing Choice Initiative, local capital project fund established through Section 2 EE, and MassWorks, which I know Bellingham, obviously, we're very well familiar with. And I'm sure others will be added to that list over time. So essentially, what it boils down to is here we need to start thinking about identifying an area in which we could create a district to support housing and support housing in a pretty dense way. And that needs to be somewhat reasonably tied to access to that commuter rail. And so the density of 15 units per acre, I was trying to think of a comp, it's probably double the density of the Curtis apartments that are being constructed right now. So it's pretty dense. We could certainly look at it a little further. I talked to our neighboring community in Franklin, and they are having MAPC consult and look at ways in which they could, identify parcels and what those parcel density would look like. I could certainly reach out to others, but I'm sure Amy, again, probably has a lot of good insight into that. I don't know, Amy, if I missed anything.
No, no. Good evening, everyone. No, it's nice to see everyone. No, Jim actually summarized it pretty succinctly. This is a so this was enacted, and DHCD had to actually do something, meaning they had to enact regulations, which they really haven't done. They've enacted draft regulations, which Jim has accurately interpreted. We have until March 31st to issue any comments on the draft regulations. It's really, so Bellingham is an MBTA adjacent community, which means that you don't have an MBTA station in Bellingham, but you have one very close to you, which is Franklin. And there's really not a lot that Bellingham, can say that's going to change DHCD's regulations at all. But they did enact these draft regulations, which we have until March 31st to comment on if we'd like to. And then we do have this meeting, which is required to tell you about Section 3A, GL Chapter 40A, Section 3A. It's a new chapter, and it is, it's called the Housing Choice Bill, so it is to promote multifamily housing. As a side note, and my own opinion, is that a town like Bellingham doesn't necessarily need the Housing Choice Act, because the town of Bellingham actually has multifamily housing. You guys have actually promoted multifamily housing. You guys are over 10% for your affordable housing. You guys have been a very, very proactive community. You're not a community that really needs this. However, the legislature, they can't just enact certain things on certain communities. And so we're all kind of stuck with this. The density is significant. We have, there's 15 units per acre or 750 units minimum. It's significant. So that's where we are. Where Bellingham is right now, where we do not have a full-time planner that can help us out with meeting the requirements of this legislation, we might want to consider reaching out to MAPC. I know that they are helping quite a few communities navigate through this. But again, that is up to you guys. If not, we will definitely figure this out.
Jim, I have two questions for you. One is, I know we're a lot farther than a half a mile from the Franklin train station, which leads into the next question. Where do we even have a footprint of area available for us to do a development of this scope? Like what are our options even?
Right. So yeah, I know that was one of the first conversations Dennis and I had was, we're clearly more than a half a mile away. We're looking at doing a 40R, which involves some similar aspects to this a few years back, and we realized that we're not in fact all that close to the commuter rail. There are some locations, some opportunity areas in which we could likely identify some swaths of land for more like redevelopment than development. We don't have a ton of open space, but we have some underutilized properties perhaps. It wouldn't be exactly a half a mile, but they would be reasonably close. But again, that density is going to be difficult to get to. We have to think about in Bellingham out here, we don't have sewer everywhere. We have sewer in a lot of places, luckily, but we don't have sewer everywhere. So that's going to be a development hurdle. Drinking water is not a big hurdle here in Bellingham. And then, whether we're good or bad, we've been a gravel community for a while. So we have a lot of wetlands that we had to work around. So we're finding 50 contiguous acres of upland is going to be somewhat of a hurdle, but that's something we could certainly work through. We might need to have kind of a working group to identify proper areas for this.
So one thing I would like to add to what Jim just said is that, these are right now, these are draft regulations that DHCD has come up with. And I anticipate, my firm anticipates that there's going to be quite a few communities that are going to reach out and say, there's no way we can find 50, contiguous upland areas that we can put multifamily housing on. Because the key word there is contiguous. So we have to find, 50 acres is a lot. So I don't know if the final regulations will change that. That aspect was not in the legislation. That was created by the regulations. But unfortunately, we don't know at this point. They don't expect final regulations until this summer.
So is this something we should be talking to our state rep about? Because, just hearing what we've heard, I can only think of one location off the top of my head that's within a half mile, and it probably is a half mile from the Bellingham line to where 495, MBTA. I bet it's even less than a half a mile if you were to really do it. And that's at the intersection of Mechanic Street and Maple Street, which there's proposed industrials rezoned. So, but it's not 50 acres. I just don't see where we could come up with 50 acres. I think it's 110.
It's 10 acres. Does the property have to be it could be redeveloped? So theoretically, you could identify 50 acres that currently has businesses on it, and you've identified it. If it meets the smell test, it's just a matter of those businesses deciding that they want to redevelop their property. It doesn't mean that we actually have to develop this housing. It's just that we have to basically have an overlay that says that housing theoretically could be built in this area.
Correct, and that's how at least I anticipate most communities doing this is by overlay.
Yeah.
It's just smoke and mirrors because it's never going to change.
Agreed.
Right, are we obligated though to build this? An overlay is one thing, but we just have to show.
We're not obligated to build it. We're obligated to adopt
Connect
the
everything
zoning.
with Curtis Pond Apartments.
Yeah.
You're not, no, we're not obligated to have, 15 units per acre zoning. Or we're not, on the ground. We have to, there has to be the allowance of that. Without a special permit, without a variance, it has to be allowed by right. And so that's how and that's how we're suggesting for most of our communities, and every community is different, obviously, but that's how we're suggesting it for most, is the overlay.
But we
And I
need
think
to-
that MAPC is also suggesting that.
So as a community, if this we say this just isn't feasible, as I started, do we go to our state rep and say, we need to fight? Or what do we do to say, we just can't, if this is a draft, it doesn't mean it's been approved. How do we go about fighting it? Or should we take on that fight?
So I think that, so first of all, I think that, we could issue comments to DHCD on their draft regulations, but in the end, I think that we will be able to achieve what Section 3A means. We can achieve that by an overlay, allowing, certain things to happen. The 50 contiguous acres is a concern for a lot of communities, but we can see what the final regulations actually call for at that point. The one thing that we don't want to do is we do not want to be in non-compliance with this, because I know that Bellingham, at least, gets MassWorks grants. And so, we do want to stay eligible for grants, because this community is very, very, very good at getting grants. And so we do want to stay eligible for grants.
What is our footprint for Curtis right now? How many acres is that?
Curtis Apartments, Jim, what is it, maybe 15?
Yeah, it's I think it's slightly over 15 acres. And we have, what is it? What is it,
Yeah.
250?
Yeah, 3 times the amount.
And you're saying Curtis doesn't even meet the density? So it
No,
has
no, it wouldn't meet the
3.5
density of the law, no.
like 8-story apartment complexes? How do you do that?
So
what
my
do we need to do
recommendation.
Today's just that we're fulfilling our obligation to discuss it
Today's to
publicly.
just dump all this on us. Thank you.
So today is just this is what the law is spelling out, and these are the guidelines. But honestly, my recommendation for right now is to hang tight. We'll see what the final guideline or the regulations say, and then we'll revisit it maybe later this summer to look at what our next steps are. As I mentioned, we have to notify DHCD that we have an action plan by the end of next year as it stands right now. So we got some time. And then again, we don't have to actually adopt anything until the end of 2024.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, this really is just, this act was this, it was enacted, and here's where we are. But again, it's kind of typical DHCD telling us that we have to do something, but they still don't have final regulations. So, but we've done it, and we're in compliance.
We've done what we had to do.
Yes,
Okay.
okay.
Did what you had to do.
Jim, you'll be drafting a letter and sending it on behalf of the town?
Yeah, I could certainly do that. I think it's just a portal online that we got to
Yeah.
submit.
So there's a form that you have to submit by May 2nd.
Okay.
That says that we've held this, and there's all kinds of other questions, but yeah.
I think I need a copy of the minutes, Hillary. So whenever you get those signed, if you want to scan them over to me.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, any other questions, comments, concerns by the board?
A lot of concerns.
Yeah.
Yes.
50 acres,
Yeah.
super fun.
All right, thanks for your time. Good to see you guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks.
All right, next up, we have Chief Daigle and Lieutenant Russell. Come on up. Come on down.
You're the next contestant
You are the
on,
next contestant.
Can you approve my budget?
She's a whiz. I'd like to start off by thanking you guys for taking the time to pull together your budget. I know that we're not supposed to be meeting for a couple of weeks, so you had to go on the accelerated path, I'm sure. Chief, do you want to start with giving us an overview and
Sure.
take it from there?
What we've got is a basic breakdown. I think we're going to broken down 3 different ways. We've got the small chart that was sent, I believe.
Yeah, there's
Kind
like
of
3 different
separation of
documents
the
on
salary side and the expense side. Makes it a little easier to look at, and we put a little description of what we're doing. We've also got the sheets that's in the system, I believe, from Mary. Makes it easy for me to look up an account number and see if I get any notes as to the differences and stuff. But overall, I think what you're looking at, it's the 22nd time I've presented budgets, so could be one more. Notice the word could.
Could be.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, I think,
Interesting.
a year from now, it'll be the last one. Basically, what I'm trying to do with this budget, we have no contract settled with clerical or police officers yet. What I've done on the salary side, I'm trying to get my manpower back to the level of like 30 officers. That will allow me to get the second detective position back in there that we've been working about. It will allow me to possibly look at getting the second SRO back in the school to give that person some help. So it's a little bit of a rebuilding process on the salary side. I've got 2 officers retiring this year. So what we're doing is we're putting in for 5. So we're basically going to gain 3 out of this. That should give me some cushion. The only problem with that is the way the system works, the lieutenant here needs to have names to book academies. They won't just take, Bellingham's going to have 2 slots, save us seats. They won't do it that way. So once we get this going, I need names. And we just got a batch of 5 officers not too long ago. It was a little rough putting them all through the academy at the same time and then getting them out and then putting them on a field training program and not having them part of Manning right away. So I think with this group, we're going to look at spreading them out a little bit. I was asked if one of the 5 was to replace me. It depends on how the booking of the academies go, really. I mean, if we can get academies right away, you know, we can book a couple. It takes 6 months of training. It's not, you know, they're gone for a couple of weeks. So we'll be looking at getting these 5 people on board. So basically what you're looking at is the money in the salary side is being offset a little bit by the senior salaries, senior longevity, we don't have to pay that anymore. So there's quite a bit of offset on that side with 2 senior officers going. Then I've got other ones that are on the fence too. I got a couple other ones. So I think this is more of a plan for the future. You know, not only to put positions back in place, but also to start planning for future retirements that are coming. Not only myself, but there's a couple other officers that are getting close. So there's nothing there that says you have to give me 6 months notice. They could come in tomorrow and say, "This way, I'm done." You know,
Really?
so we have to start planning for these things. And to get back the second detective right now is crucial. There's a lot of work in that office. One of the retirements coming up at the same time is going to be my court officer. So the 2 detectives and the court officer work hand in hand. They cover each other on days off and stuff. So the timing will be good with the court officer retiring to get somebody in that office, not only as a court officer, but as a detective, and get the 3 of them working together right away and some training. So it's all part of a plan to get the personnel back to some kind of operation. And then we'll still be short a few, but my goal is to get it back to like 30 or so, because we've had as many as like 34 in the past.
What are we at right now?
27.
That
That's what
includes
you're
people like Lenny who are out.
Yeah. So if we add 5, we're only adding 3, so that'll bring me back to the 30. So that's the goal.
There were positions that were not filled through attrition, so this brings it back to where it was several years ago.
So on the salary side, the bulk of it is the addition of the officers. Plus, we've also this year put back a 7th dispatcher already. So that was partially funded last year. So now we'll be back to funding the 7th dispatcher. So dispatch is crazy in that place between police and fire. I mean, I'm sure the fire chief can tell you, they just don't stop. It's call after call after call. And my guys are there with them unless it's out of town, but we have our own calls also. So that 7th dispatcher has been crucial, and it's been a big help to get help in the station to either have double coverage or coverage on a day off or vacations, because there's so much training involved. The days of throwing an officer on the desk are just too dangerous. They don't have the training with the 911 systems and everything else. So
And are the dispatchers, is it still, I know at a time it was hard to get some because they kept leaving to go to basically the new central command.
Right.
And are you finding there's more consistency with dispatchers now? Are you still struggling with?
we've got a lot of new bodies. I think we're still struggling with that.
Yeah.
It's not only with the dispatchers, but it's with the police officers also. You know, so you can't blame these young kids if they want to move on and make better money somewhere else. So it's all part of the game right
Yeah.
now. But right now we got quite a few new ones that are working out fairly well. But that's the bulk of the salary side anyway. On the expense side, it's a little bit of a mix of taking on more building maintenance, costs for the academies of these guys, just the little things in here. We're gonna get back to leasing the motorcycle again, which we haven't done in a few years. It's all part of like traffic safety. I mean, we need that guy out there to not only get into certain areas, but also reduce some radar and get some of this traffic slowing down. So I don't know, it's probably easier if we just, I don't know if you have any questions that we want to put forward before we.
So my question I have, you talked about central dispatch, and we've had this discussion before. Why wouldn't you think it would be good for the town or Dennis, or, you know, you're
Too
changing,
expensive.
no, what's that?
It's more
It's
expensive,
really
How much
expensive.
more?
a lot more. These MECs, the MEC or any of these other regional dispatch centers, they have board of directors and they just basically write their own budget and everything. So I think when we looked at it before we increased the dispatchers, it was gonna cost us around $500,000, when at the time we were only paying $343, I believe it was. So within a couple extra $1,000, and then they don't do everything.
We went on road trips, we checked it out. We still have to have station offices because you can't close the building. So
Yeah.
I get it, you know what I mean? It's something that's, you know, up in the West Coast, like everything else starts up there with wildfires, they go regional this, regional that, but I've never been sold on it myself. It is a big headache doing both police and fire. I always tell the fire chief I'd like to get rid of him and his fire calls, and I'll just keep my police calls, but they won't let him join the regionals without us, so that's not gonna happen. So for now, I think we're best just putting up with the way it is. I don't have an issue with it. I mean, we go through a lot of people, but it's not the job itself, it's the pay. That's what it comes down to. You know, they can make better money going to regional dispatches or other towns actually too.
There's gotta be a cost of bringing somebody on, training them, getting them up to speed, and then losing them and constantly having a revolving door. So you say it's more expensive, but when you look at the big picture of the cost that you can't put a dollar on, it's just all these other costs, right? Overtime because you're training, and you start looking at it from a more micro versus, oh, it's just more expensive. I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all, that it's just more expensive. And I think we should look at it a little more closely, because I know that you're not sold on it, but my thinking is, it's not a good situation to constantly have a revolving door of people coming in, training them up, and I think something gets lost. I mean, what's the turnover at these central places when they go there? Are they folks that have, you know, say you have one here, they go to central, do they turn over, or do they have some longevity? They're 3, 5, because I certainly would want to be talking to someone with a lot of experience. If I was having a medical emergency, or my wife was having one, I want someone on the phone that has experience, not someone who's being trained up. I look at the liability side. I look at a much bigger picture than just, because I know just from having a business, what it's like to have a revolving door, constantly training new people. And that's a challenge for you guys. And that's not a fun challenge to have. That's a laborious, pain in the butt type situation.
The town made a change last year where we consolidated some steps.
Yeah.
And we're stable now. We had one dispatcher, my second senior dispatcher. She just didn't want to wait for the change, so she went to the MEC.
Yeah.
She lasted less than 2 months because it's cliquey over there. All the people that work there from Booster Ambulance Service, and they alienated her. She's now working over in Medway. So the grass isn't always green there.
Yeah.
There's issues everywhere, but we're stable now because of the change that we made.
So what is-
On the
what's-
dispatch side.
What is the salary difference between working here in Bellingham or going to
It
regional?
was
Is it like-
substantial before, we've closed the gap a little bit.
So you're feeling like that's helping
And
you?
it's,
Yeah,
and I,
absolutely.
and I don't think they've been in existence in this area long enough to do a 5-year look back.
I just wonder.
That's only been a couple of years.
Again, I'm not,
It's all
our
new.
job here is listen, challenge it, look outside the box. Just because we've been doing it a certain way doesn't mean it's gonna be the right way forever.
Right.
You know, the world is evolving.
I think
We have to
eventually
evolve with it.
we might end up there because you'll be at the mercy of the state. Because once we go, I believe we lose all our
Well,
911 equipment. And, that's a big, and there's no going back.
Yeah.
Once you do it, you're gone.
You're gone, yeah.
And they get your equipment.
Yeah,
So
you don't get your piece after that. The state has changed their philosophy. I just talked to Verizon, State 911 Verizon rep recently. They're not pushing municipalities anymore into regionals because they know of all the problems with the regionals. Board of directors, so this area is covered by the MEC, which is over in Plainville. It's over in Norfolk, I think, right now. And then there's one in Foxborough. Foxborough only handles 911 calls. So you're still gonna have somebody handle all your business calls.
Yeah.
You still have somebody do the lobby.
Mhm.
Since we last were over there and looked at it, both those groups renegotiated, and now they're doing less than what they were when we looked at it. So like Foxborough's pissed off, Franklin's pissed off, everybody's pissed, but.
So they went there and now
But
they're
they
not getting
signed
the
on,
same
they
level of
lost their
service.
PSAPs, and now they can't go back. They're done. And to switch from one regional PSAP to another is almost, you need like an act of Congress. That's
Well,
what 911 told me.
And the
Okay.
key is that you still have to have people in that dispatcher position.
So
So
that's
essentially
something
you're
on my desk.
paying twice.
right, it's either keep civilians at a cheaper rate or have an officer there to pay a higher rate. So either way, you gotta have the station there.
Right.
We did, as the lieutenant said, and the chief, we did go out, we visited the dispatch facility in Foxborough almost a year ago, and it's a very impressive facility, and they are very well trained. I think the annual budget for us, I think they had told us was about $550,000. Our budget at the time was in the $300,000 range for dispatch. So it was a big difference there. And as the chief said, when Foxborough joined, we asked, well, what did you do for your lobby? They take the 911 calls. What did you do within your station to manage someone calling up to ask a question
Yeah.
that's non-emergency? And essentially what they did was they put the sergeant in charge at the desk. So the sergeant in charge is what they told us in Foxborough was answering the calls, which doesn't make sense to have an $80,000 salary sitting at the desk. But we have, the reason we were looking a year ago was because of the turnover in dispatch. We consolidated some steps. I think we're more competitive now. Right now, I think we've stopped the bleeding. Lieutenant is responsible for the dispatchers. He's the one who trains them, and
Okay.
in his early years, he was a dispatcher. So no one knows it better than he does. But we need to stay competitive because we were losing dispatches to other towns and we were losing dispatches to these central regional offices. But that has stopped in the last year.
Haven't we lost officers in other towns because they're offering higher salaries or higher wages, benefits, et cetera? I know we lost a few to Foxborough. I might have the town mixed up. I know we lost one or two to Foxborough, and I hear just because. All right, so maybe it's something we have to look at as a town. Hire these folks, train them, they're here, and then after 3 or 4 years, they're gone to Foxborough or somebody else.
With the dispatch, it was critical because we were at a point where we had one dispatcher that I think had worked 80 consecutive shifts or something ridiculous like that. No one should have to do that.
No.
So the stability, we have 2 dispatchers on at certain shifts, kind of the impact shifts. So we've made some strides, and they are busy enough that on some of those impact shifts, you need 2 dispatchers there. Just one scene, you've got how many pieces of apparatus responding, so
Right.
it can be difficult. But I think we've made some gains with regard to the dispatch. It was certainly an item of concern that we put a lot of attention on.
Sounds like, yeah.
Hopefully we stay there. If not, then as the chief said, it may be something that we have to go back and look at again.
Personally, in my opinion, I just this is an area I've always said, public safety, fire and police, It's not an area as a member of this board that I want to go cheap on. You know, I remember one of the first things I voted on years ago was a new vest. I couldn't believe that we're working with outdated technology. They should be outfitted with the best technology. We should be paying competitive salaries. We're hiring guys and then training them and working them hard. And then they move off to a bigger town that pays, or maybe even the same size town that pays more competitive wages. Bellingham's a big town. I mean, you know, I hear ambulance and police on my street nonstop. So I know when you're down to South Bellingham, it's nonstop down there too.
No, this development sounds pretty, looks nice, but guess what? There's an impact.
No, absolutely.
Police, fires, schools, everything, so.
New
it all
industrial
sounds good,
buildings.
but you understand by there's some effects on this too, so.
To
Have
your
really
point,
think
I
about
remember
it.
when we were presenting the new police station, you stood up and your only question when you weren't on the board was, is this adequate for our department? Is this gonna meet
Exactly.
the needs?
I just want to make
It's
sure,
consistent.
and I'm consistent across the board.
Right.
Is it adequate? Because that's one area where I don't like the penny pinch, flat out. Don't like the penny pinch on public safety.
It's definitely busy.
Helen, any specific questions, or Michael? You have several, okay.
It's
Right.
budget time.
Thank you for the heads up.
Shocker.
If we know that we're going to have 2 retirements.
Yeah.
And the net effect is to get to 30. Right? We're at 27 plus 5 minus 2, simple math. We look back at the last 5 years of officers who've left us. What is that number? Because I would say that if we are losing 3 officers a year, why aren't we going for 8? Because the data would say we're going to lose 2 or 3 just because. Particularly if it's gonna take 6 months to
Right.
get them in here.
All I did was go back 5 years.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I went back 5 years on both,
I mean, I think of officers like Stephen Hall going to Foxborough,
Right,
and,
right.
and is Patrick still there? Yeah.
Yeah, then I'm just, okay, good.
So since 2015, when we started rebuilding the department, we've added 14 officers, we've lost 12 officers, 9 of which were not anticipated. We had several that had, one that had resigned.
1.8 a year
So
over 5 years.
that's where we are now. We'll lose 2 more this year. We're adding 4 right now. In the stage of putting 4. We'll beginning of the fiscal year, we'll start the process for that.
You see where I'm going?
We have to spread
I
it
guess
out a
I'm
little
asking the question is, why not more than 5 if we know we're going to be down? Because if we are down for 6 months, that's 6 months of overtime that we're paying somebody. So if we're looking for names, maybe the question's to Dennis or Mary, but why isn't it a bigger number if we know that the data is there that we should be shooting for 8? And I know the answer is overtime, but
Yeah.
benefits and everything
I
else.
know right now we're scrambling to get these 4 as close to the June academies as possible. That means they won't be out until November.
That's
So
to his point.
to my point, there we go. If we need some more for next February and next April and next May,
'Cause you
I
can't-
think you're asking for too little.
And you can't put out an announcement that it takes people to lateral transfer in, because who wants to come and make less money? So that's a problem we face with that.
So I guess to this board,
This is
they need more than they're asking for.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I have some other questions that probably aren't as pleasant.
I was gonna say, the chief is probably really happy to add in
Well-
8 officers in his budget.
Well,
I mean, if the net
That's-
effect is, it's not adding 8 to the budget, it's where are
No,
we
but-
going to be 1 year from
To
now?
factor in more money.
To the chief's defense and to the lieutenant's defense, being on this board for a number of years now, he's been hammered quite a bit by, members of this board over the years. And I think the part of it is that he's trying to be conservative and not going all in, especially if he's thinking about, as he said, maybe retiring in a couple of years. I get it. What we're asking you is, don't be conservative, or at least I am. I want to hear, or it doesn't mean we're
We
going to
need
say
to know what
yes.
that number is.
That doesn't mean we're gonna say yes, but we really would like to know what that number really is, be properly, fully staffed. Based on your recommendations, if we stay with dispatching, as you have it today, what are your recommendations? And that's kind of how I would love you to just come to us with that.
right.
And where are we? And I'd love to know from a competitive standpoint with our peer towns, right? Where are we from a competitive salary standpoint. Maybe Mary can help us or
So
someone.
we're gonna be having an executive session at the conclusion of this meeting to talk about negotiations.
Okay, I
We
just
got
want to
some
understand.
studies, we got some studies.
Okay, fair enough.
Stuff we're
Mike,
looking at.
Mr. Carter was going, so I'll be quiet.
You with me on the numbers?
I'm with you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I don't think you're gonna get a complaint from anyone on this board that
Well, I mean, other than, can we
That-
afford it?
That's
But-
right.
But if we
public
know,
safety
if we're
deserves
adding
more
5
money.
and 2 are retiring, we're
Right,
gonna
we're
lose
never getting
1.8, we're only adding
Yeah.
We're not getting to the ideal, which is 30, it sounds like, right?
We will with the fifth person after.
Yeah.
before they leave,
Right.
before someone else.
But I recall a conversation going back a few years that the ideal number was 32.
2
Yeah,
per
it used to be
1,000.
like 2 per 1,000.
That's
yeah.
what you, I remember you
Yeah.
saying that more than once. So maybe we should be thinking about the ideal situation and figure out how we can afford it, if we can or not.
Because I think once this budget batch gets through, we'll be looking to do more. As we look down the road and say, okay, now this year, definitely got a plan for my retirement
Yeah.
on the next cycle, so maybe that's the time to add a couple more and stuff, so. It's tough to train so many at once, it just takes forever, you know, academies, when I went, it was 3 months, now it's double that. So you lose these kids for 6 months, I mean, you gotta have some
Yeah.
laws that didn't
Right,
exist. and-
Just a few more questions then. On part-time vehicle maintenance coordinator, I know Mike Soder used to beat you up on this. Is it true that we're paying that individual $58 an hour?
That's the detail rate, which is less than you would pay a mechanic, I believe.
Well, I mean, if you take a car to have their oil change, it's gonna be, I would think it's gonna be paying a mechanic a lot less.
He's doing 5 to 6 cars a day, and he's doing, checking the brakes and all that stuff. You don't get all that with an oil change. And just to schedule it at like CIO or any of the other garages, we can't get 5, 6 cars done like that in a day. You just can't do it. So he gets our entire fleet in 2 days. It's a schedule with the lift at the DPW, but other than that.
The optics just don't look good at $58.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But
For overtime wages, how do you determine which organizations you absorb the cost of the details versus charging?
Most of the time, if it's a town one they can't afford, if it's a fundraiser, say you were doing one for your kids or something, and I was able to do it, that would kind of take a priority over a private detail.
When you say your kids, you mean the
Students,
school
yeah,
students,
sorry.
okay.
So,
Not Mr. Connor's children.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
It doesn't detail in front of me,
No,
sorry.
There's no
I mean,
detail.
but I mean, like, in this budget is the Harlem Wizards. Now, I think that's just a carryover because we haven't had the Harlem Wizards here in 3
Well,
years.
you know what happens, and I'll be honest with this zero-based, it's tough to predict overtime. I mean, it's kind of like predicting snow removal.
No, I agree, but I mean,
Right, so.
as I do a similar budget,
Right.
it more would say, I expect based on historic that we're gonna have 25 events in a given
Right.
year as opposed to putting down events that don't exist.
Well, what are we doing this year? And this is a main point that I was thinking about earlier. We had the fireworks every year. We got rid of the fireworks. Then we decided to do the carnival. So now we do a carnival. So when you go to sit down and do your budget for next year, do you put in the fireworks? Do you put in the carnival? We don't know what the town's gonna do. You know what I mean? So,
No, I agree, but you
You
did
know,
Bellingham
you-
Education Foundation didn't pay for something. That's in here.
okay.
And they didn't have an event last year that was covered. So just, when you look at, I think it's easier just to say that you are probably going to do 20 to 25 events, and then you determine it as to put in something in the budget narrative that doesn't exist.
So you're saying
Should
put in
say-
$25,000 for community.
Yes.
Yeah,
Flat,
details.
historic
or,
details.
identifying, listing them up, Yeah.
Because,
or whatever
I mean,
that
I think
is.
you're going into more detail than you need because it creates like
Right.
eyebrow raising, like, come on, we're not doing this.
It's tough to break down.
Because you
overtime.
can do the football games for free if that's the case.
Right.
You said you're bringing back the motorcycle?
Yeah.
Why do we have a pager for Lieutenant Ranieri?
That's mostly for his detective stuff. The detectives.
Didn't even know that pagers were even issued.
Yeah, he's been stuck with that since the 80s, I believe, yeah. And,
Oh.
when the detectives need for something quick, they always give him a quick page. It's mostly related to the detective work.
And I say this because I picked on you last year for this.
It's all right.
The fire chief has nothing down for conferences, and you have Central Mass Chief of Police, Mass Chief of Police, International Association of Chiefs, Norfolk County Chiefs, Chiefs Monthly Meeting, National Association of Chiefs, New England Association of Chiefs.
It's
Do you really go to all those things? Do we really need to be part of all those things?
It depends how you want to enhance your job or not. I used to go to conferences every year with the international chiefs and have a week of classes and vendors. The reason you see Worcester County stuff versus Norfolk County is because of the way we do our court work. I have to belong to Worcester County groups to deal with the DAs and the judges and everybody at the Worcester County group. Technically, we belong to Norfolk County, so we have to deal with the Norfolk County DA and, you know, so you got to play two counties of chiefs, basically. So my monthly meetings, I go to Norfolk County Chiefs once a month, and I go to Worcester County, which we're more active in, the Worcester side. I'm on the board of directors with that. The Mass Chiefs, that's where you get your legal defense funds. We get our in-service training every year. We get legal updates. The international chief, that's just a circuit around the country. I used to go to conferences. I think I've been to 3 or 4. It's not something I do every year, but so there's quite a few groups. New England, there's a New England group of chiefs that have conferences. It's mostly classes, vendors, stuff like that. So we're playing 2 counties. And
Just with
Yeah.
30+ years experience, I'm not sure that you need any more education, chief.
well, I won't. Next guy can do what he wants. If the chief, the other chief doesn't want to go anywhere, associate with anybody, that's up to him. Yeah.
Yes, so
Yeah, with the reform stuff right now, it's constant classes, it's constant updates.
I did have some other questions just for the board's benefit that Mary answered on this one-page comparison. The numbers from this spreadsheet did not match this spreadsheet. It was explained that it's grants that were applied, is that correct?
Yeah, so it's the E911 grant that the police department receives or has been fortunate enough to receive each year. And what we do is we transfer funds from the dispatching salary line down to the expense budget. The summary sheet that is in Excel format does not have that transition included in here. So the FY22 budget that's presented here was the original budget adopted at the spring town meeting. It does not include the changes that we made in the fall town meeting.
No, just didn't look up.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Martinez, anything else? Kelly? Good. All right, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Just follow up. Do you think it's reasonable that within a month we could get them different numbers as to what your staffing level you would recommend? I mean, assuming that we're targeting 30, it's really not a number of 5, it's probably a number of 7 or 8, and what that impact would be to us. All right. I just wouldn't want to get back here next year when we're still at 26.
we're doing 4 now, where at the beginning of the fiscal year, we keep doing 1, so you could say 4, another 4, and at the beginning of the fiscal year, that's great.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't
That's up to you guys.
necessarily fund them with the full salary because they're going to be leaving. So it's
Right.
more a
Well,
matter
absolutely,
of
and you're going to might be
going
losing a
ahead
higher to replace a lower, but there's a
there's time where they need to, I think your point is, and we've talked about it, is go ahead and request, get the
make
list
the
going.
request so that we have them coming on board for whenever we think we need them in Q3 of the fiscal year.
And I know that's a chore, just getting them in the academy.
Yeah, the thing that the chief was explaining earlier is, especially with now the reform, that you just can't call and say, hey, we want to, put these guys in the academy. They have to pass the PAT, psychological. There's so much stuff that we have to go through now because of the reform. Like I said, we have one in the academy already scheduled. I have 2 going to the PAT Saturday. Hopefully they pass. If they pass, Monday morning we'll be, sending their stuff in, try to get a slot. The MPTC, which years ago said they were going to have a bunch of academies, haven't done it. So it's June, or I believe the next one's September. So we got to scramble to try to get them into this June one and everything. And then the other one that's coming after the fiscal year, he can go for the September and stuff like that.
But it may be that
guys
if we had more,
If you guys want more, then we can start that process.
Yeah, it's a matter of dealing with civil service, telling them how many positions we're gonna hire, how many names they're gonna send us, doing interviews.
Just a comment more for the public. We've had this discussion, chief, about you know, we have increased traffic in the town. We have an issue with speed. Talked about Taunton Street, talked about other streets where there's speed, and I've said, Don, hey, we just don't have enough manpower to have them out there taking radar. I understand that. But we get a lot of complaints here, and I know you know it too. So the point is, again, public safety. If we could, you know, if we had a few more police officers that part of their detail, their 8 hours was randomly taking, you know, radar in certain areas to slow traffic down. But I know we don't have the manpower for what we'd like to do. So that's just another thing. And I know, I can't imagine anybody out there in the public. I know the Taunton Street would be all, say, oh, here again, like they were the last meeting, just try to slow some traffic down. It's just, it's out of hand. And I know you know it. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's really on some of these sides, Center Street, Maple Street, Taunton Street, it's out of hand. The speed is out of hand.
When you have sufficient manpower, you can take a guy off a shift and you still meet the minimum requirements of
Right.
the contract. And you can say, you're a radar cut today.
And if you need them, you can pull them.
That's it.
That's right. I get
We've
it.
done that before in the past, you know.
I'll ask you one more question. When you talk about your manpower, if we talking there, will we have enough vehicles to support the manpower?
I think so.
Do you think so? Or would you be coming back saying, hey, thanks for the extra guys, but we need
No,
more
no.
vehicles?
No, I
Because
think
I want to think about that stuff too.
No, I think
What do you need to
last-
support that?
Last capital was that we're in a good situation now. We're adding a car this year.
Mhm.
That's gonna put us in a better situation.
Good, okay.
So we got that, we got the vehicles, it's just.
Police is in a good rotation with their
Yeah.
vehicles, and lieutenant's always done a great job of breaking everything down for us, mileage wise, who's using it, which one is next in the queue, so we're never wondering.
Okay, sorry to keep you guys
All
here long.
right, thank you very
All right,
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mary. We're gonna talk about borrowing authorization. Ooh.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night. All right. Good evening, everybody. Everybody okay?
Hi, Mary. Yeah.
How are ya?
Sorry.
We're great. How you doing?
Good. Can I take this off from the other one over here?
Sure.
So tonight we're here to talk about two things. One is a borrowing authorization and the other is the snow and ice deficit. You should have received a couple of documents from me last week and hopefully you've had an opportunity to take a peek at it. Just to bring you up to speed, at our fall town meeting authorized borrowing for 3 different projects in the sum total of $5,041,175. That was for the purchase of the Depot Street building for $2.7 million, road improvement projects for $1.5 million, and a water standpipe rehab for $841,000. So last week we conducted our issuance of debt, and we were very fortunate enough to receive 7 very competitive bids based on the debt that was issued on behalf of the town of Bellingham, with our AA+ rating that we recently reaffirmed with Standard & Poor's. So the winning bid was issued to an investment firm called Piper Sandler and Company, and it had an average interest rate of 2%, essentially 2.0009%. And so we had very competitive results, and we also received a premium of $385,000. So after the issuance costs and the underwriting fees and the premium was applied, what we have actually financed is $4.765 million. So tonight, what I am asking is for the board to take their official vote to authorize the sale. And you received a fairly lengthy document that included the details of it, but we don't need to read that lengthy document. We can read a shortened motion, which I have supplied for you guys. So are there any questions?
Do you have any questions before we entertain a motion? Michael, you look like.
After this is all done, what will our short-term obligations be that we're rolling over on a?
So we actually do not have any short-term debt outstanding.
This is everything.
Well, this debt issuance is actually all new money. We refinanced our last piece of short-term debt last year with our issuance last year. So we are not currently carrying any short-term debt.
So I move that the board authorize the sale of 4,765,000 general obligations bonds dated February 17th, 2022, as outlined in the document entitled Vote of the Board of Selectmen dated February 7th, 2022, as prepared by bond counsel and provided to each board member. And further, I move that the board authorize all related documents as presented and we waive full reading of these documents.
First by Mr. Martinez,
Second.
second by Mr. Connor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none.
Excellent, thank you. So pursuant to that, I am going to leave documents with Hillary. And these are Hillary, these are for you to sign, and this packet here is for the select board to sign. There are quite a number of pages in here. They do not necessarily need to be signed tonight, but it would be helpful if you could pass them around. So I'll leave that with you, okay? Thanks, Hillary. All right, moving on to our second order of business. As per Mass General Law, we are here tonight to talk about snow and ice deficit and authorizing emergency spending of our snow and ice operations. It is the only line item in the municipal budget that allows for deficit spending, but it does require the approval and authorization from the Board of Selectmen. I believe this is a very routine and customary process for you guys. So I would ask that just to give you an update on where we stand. So the town appropriates $260,000 annually for our snow and ice removal operations, knowing that we will backfill it with, when we go into deficit spending, we typically cover it with free cash at our next town meeting. To date of that $260,000, we have $27,000 remaining. So with the last snow event that we have and the bills that we've received so far, we've got $128,000 worth of bills pending. And with $27,000 remaining, I venture to guess our next event will certainly utilize that remaining funding.
May it not be a foot or two of snow, the next event. Just wanna
Bring it
put that out
on.
there.
Yes.
It's like a nice 6 inches. Anyway, I digress. Anybody want to entertain the motion?
I move to authorize the town to deficit spend for snow and ice operations for fiscal year 2022 as allowed by Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31D.
First from Mrs. Grant.
Second.
Second from Mr. Martinez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none.
Question.
4-0.
So a few years back, we increased the amount that we would set in the budget to whatever was considered below the lowest, I think it was a 5-year average. Procedurally, why can't we put this motion together in July and not have to wait until Don tells us we're out of money?
You technically could, but the Department of Revenue, well, first you wouldn't want to put it in July because the Department of Revenue frowns upon you authorizing snow and ice before the first flake has ever fallen.
Okay.
So you do need to do it closer to the season. And the Department of Revenue frowns upon communities just doing it unilaterally, because we have had years where some communities didn't even utilize their full appropriation in snow and ice. And
But that's never happened here because we always know that we're going to fill the salt shed for $250,000.
What we tend to do is if there's any appropriation left over for snow and ice,
Yeah.
the wise thing to do is to fill your salt shed as quickly as possible.
Are we ever at risk if we overspend without that vote?
Yes, it's not allowed. There would be ramifications. Yes.
I guess just procedurally, shouldn't this be in the minutes to do in late December every year?
It could be, but if we don't have a snow event in December, if we haven't started having any events until January, February, which is why, what we did last year is I set up a calendar reminder for Hillary and I, and it's actually come up for the last several weeks to say whether we're ready to bring it forward to the board or not.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
okay. That's it.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mary.
you.
Great job with the borrowing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, very happy.
It's
So
always
Mary,
great news.
they're gonna sign this, but you want,
And then we can pass it off to Larry. You can do it tomorrow, or you can, it's entirely up to you. There's a number of pages that need to be sealed. There's 14 bonds along that all need to be processed. Do you want Larry to do his first while you finish your meeting?
sure,
How's that? Excellent, thank you.
awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks. Night.
All right, Mr. McCarthy, thank you for your patience. Come on up, front and center, please.
Do you want some help there? Pick an iPad.
Pick an iPad, any iPad.
First of all, it's exciting to have someone come in that's interested in getting involved in town.
Really unusual, that's unusual, huh?
Yeah.
It is unusual, sadly, so
I've never done it for either, so,
you what?
I've never done it for either.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, well,
No, to be honest.
you sure you know what you're getting into?
Not really.
After
but-
sitting through this meeting? I know Kelly has exchanged, or you
Yeah.
guys have exchanged some
Yeah, I got a
information.
little bit of
back and
background.
forth. You do have a very impressive background. We'll start off by, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in joining the Capital Improvement Committee?
So recent resident of Bellingham, so grew up, and most of my life was in Milford, raised our 3 sons in Holliston, and then downsized in Bellingham. We built a home on Depot Street. So like 2.5 years ago, and really liked the town. And we're still empty nesters now, so I have more time on my hands. I've never really done anything to give back to communities. So that's something I've always wondered the time for now. And I've spent a lot of time in my career managing massive capital budgets. So I have sort of a passion for capital and managing real estate. And how that works, I've never done it in public forum, more in private settings, but I think that's the short story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Turn it over to my colleagues. Do you have any questions for Jack?
No, just a big thank you. I mean, I don't know what questions to ask. We have someone here that wants to volunteer. You have a great background, and to me, I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for having me.
You want to run for the board of selectmen?
And we have an open slot.
You really?
Anything, Kelly, you want to highlight?
So
from your
I'm just
conversation?
gonna add in that, as Mrs. McNulty alluded to, Hillary gave Jack's email to me so that I could reach out to him and give him some background on capital improvement. And knowing the other players on capital improvement, I think Jack will be a really good counterpart to Roland. He's the chairman of that committee, Roland. And I think that, why are you laughing?
Yeah,
The way you said counter.
It's a good, but I think it's a good
Checks and
counterpart to what Roland brings to the table and what Jack brings to the table. It's a committee that I've been on for 5 years as well. That kind of fell into my lap, but I definitely have learned a lot more about that side of things. And I think the town is growing. We're looking at more infrastructure projects and things. So now is a good time to bring people who want to be active on the committee and have a good background to do it. So
I want to know,
I think it's a
I
good
want to
fit.
understand where the money's going to, as a taxpayer, a resident, I want to have an understanding of, where these dollars are going and play a role in that if I can.
Absolutely. And as Don said, we appreciate you being here tonight. Dennis, I don't know if you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
Hillary?
Welcome.
Congratulations. This is the easiest part of our meeting. Thank you very much for your
Thank you,
time and your
Charles.
patience.
We have to
Well,
vote
Oh,
on that.
sorry.
Yeah.
So are we gonna vote tonight or are we gonna do it?
Just
in
do them all
March?
at March.
Yeah. That's
So
what we had been doing.
procedurally, we
Okay.
usually do all the appointments in March.
No
So
problem.
will he have to come back for that, or
No.
you can always tune into your local cable
Maybe
channel?
I'll come back.
So
Or you
are
can
there,
come back,
are
you're
there
welcome.
meetings, is there a capital committee meeting before March?
No, so capital, we will get back into meeting typically after the budget. We'll
Budget.
see if there's any capital. Usually it's the biggest in the fall.
Yeah.
And I don't think, is there anything that's gonna be
There's
school?
there is going to be a couple of items that we are evaluating bringing forward. One of them is certainly police vehicles that you just heard about.
Yeah.
And given the price, that will require a capital recommendation. There may or may not be a street project that comes forward. We're looking at one now.
So what we typically will do is we'll meet a couple times closer to the May town meeting once this budget gets set. So Tina is our clerk. So she is very good at disseminating, getting us all on the right page.
Okay.
And we try and do some of the meetings in conjunction with the finance committee, so everyone can hear everything at the same time. But there wouldn't be anything coming up
Is there any
prior.
other openings on FinCom as well?
Yeah, I think there's one, but that's moderator.
Yeah, that would be.
Right, no, I
That's
understand
Michael
that, but I mean, you
I
you did
think
both
there's
for a while.
6. Yes, I think there's 6, right, Mary? Still 6, there's still one more.
Opportunity if they want to do that.
Let's let them get eased in a little bit, Michael, before we have them on the select board.
One at a time.
Yes.
One at a time.
And this will be a good one, I think, too, because it will give you a general, it will give you a small idea of what FinCom likes to look at as well. Well, capital allows you to get your feet wet with, a few meetings around town meetings, so it's not a huge time commitment.
How many meetings roughly? Does it vary?
5 or 6 a year, if that, and it really just depends. If there were a lot more this past fall because we were looking at purchasing a building.
Right.
So there was some site walks and things like that, but I think the most I've had in a year is 6.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right,
So
enjoy the rest of
you'll
your
hear
night.
from us in March.
Yeah, I'll
Thank
be
you
in
for
touch.
coming
Nice to
in.
meet you all.
All right,
Take
take care. Okay, anything under old business?
We still
Yeah.
have Brian Norton.
So what action are we taking on that, Hillary? Is it a conversation?
Brian Norton, yes, this should be, there was an email.
Just, yeah, just.
We
Oh,
discussed
okay, I'm
it last
sorry.
meeting, but you weren't here.
Okay. This is the gentleman that's gone for 6 months, he's
Yep,
coming
he
back.
had to sign a 1-year lease, and he
Okay.
was looking to see if you would extend his conservation position until his lease is up.
So what's the pleasure of the board, or what do you want, are we voting?
I make a motion to extend.
I'll second the motion.
Did you want Kelly to finish?
No,
thought she
that's
did.
all.
Okay.
No, I was trying to figure out to extend another 6 months until June 1st.
First by Mrs. Brandt, second by Mr. Martinez. All those in favor say aye.
I
Opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, 3-1.
Okay.
do you want me to do the
The question
abatements
regarding
under-
that, just as a follow-up. So it's listed as the Conservation Commission has 7 members for 3-year terms, but we have 3 that expire in 22, 1 that expires in 23, and 3 that expire in 24. Will we be adjusting those so that we're on a 3-2-2 schedule?
I'm gonna check with Ann on that because
Doesn't make sense.
I know, but that's how it's been, that's how it's set up.
Typically, we fix that
Yeah.
when you came on board.
Mhm.
Doesn't make sense that we would have a gap. Because that's more control than it needs, than need be.
Right, you usually like,
7 members, 3-2-2.
yeah. Okay. I'll touch base with Ann on it. We can fix that in March.
All right, we good? Michael?
Yeah.
All right, Kelly, you want to go through the abatements?
All right, so we've got 3 abatements here for November, December, January, because what we did not realize was that Barbara
Was
was
Barbara
out.
out, Dennis? Yeah, okay.
And so we,
Missed some?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
She just gave them all to me this.
So each month is not exorbitant, but it's a lot over the 3. So, I move to accept which one is this? November abatements as follows: capital improvement charge for $277.50, sewer $1,666.05, stormwater $1,608, trash $155.83, water $2,521.28, for a total amount of $6,228.66.
We have to read them all individually, Hillary? Yes.
For
each month.
each month,
Yeah.
I would, yes.
First by Mrs. Grant, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Martinez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none.
Presenting the December 2021 abatements. Capital improvement charge $270, sewer $1,916.16, stormwater $72, trash $194, water $1,135.41. I feel like I missed Hang on, did I? No, I don't think I.
It's a great total.
Grand total, $3,587.57.
First by Mrs. Grant, second, we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Martinez. All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed? None.
And finally, January, capital improvement charge, $675. Sewer, $247.90. Stormwater, $216. Trash, $635.50. And water, $210.86, for a grand total of $1,985.26.
First by Mrs. Grant, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Connors. Connor, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None. Sorry, Michael. Aye. Anything else under other business?
Yep, we have gift grant acceptance.
I move that the Board of Selectmen accept the gifts and grants as listed herein with said expenditures to be under the direction of the parties noted. Do you want us to do the amounts? Or do we need to with the?
I don't think we need
Do we need to read the agenda? No. First by
Second.
Mrs. Grant, second by Mr. Martinez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None. Okay, did I miss something? Good, right? Okay.
So do we have the Taunton Street supplement, is that under
That's
old
me.
business or the town administrator report, your report, right?
Waiting for our chairwoman. to-
Anything else under other business? How about new business?
Yes, I'd like to bring something up. Actually, as part of the charter and bylaw committee review, going through them, I noticed one thing that, just as a topic, so that we have bylaws for like ice cream vendors and different things. But what's become real popular these days are food trucks. We have no regulations, no guidelines in our bylaws.
The state does that. It's a state application.
So like when Cousins Maine Lobster comes and parks in front of Larry's,
We don't, there, as far as I know, the state does that and they go to the police chief to get a signature. They check their,
So I'm not sure if that's right. And the only reason I say that is because I was online today looking, and there are towns that have
we have
bylaws.
bylaws for ice
that.
cream trucks.
okay, well, I know that food trucks do a state application.
Yeah, and then they have to do a city, like a city, Framingham, there's all these
We used to have
different
problems
things.
at the baseball fields, because people would roll up with food trucks and try
Yeah.
to sell at baseball games.
So the only interaction I've ever had with people with food trucks is that they get their application from the state of Massachusetts and then they bring their ID and they do a background check at the police station.
In the past, this board had specifically voted to exclude them from going anywhere on Blackstone Street, Hartford Street, or High Street.
I think what Mr. Martinez was talking about is maybe a bylaw that talks in terms of the inspectional services going down and
So you would need to create.
not to
Yeah, well,
inspect
that's
their
exactly
operation,
right.
but to make sure that they have adequate barrels.
So
or
they have trash and they have permission
Parking,
and,
yeah.
and, you know, they've got, like, there's a pizza one that is over there by Rosewood quite a bit across from, and it's an open fire pit type thing of pizza. It's delicious, great. I'm not saying I'm the anti, I'm very much in favor of it, but looking at the bylaws, we have bylaws for, you know, ice cream trucks, and why in the world we wouldn't have some sort of bylaw for food trucks? So again, we're not looking to add that to the current bylaw, the review that we're going through, we're not gonna add that, but we're looking at, you know, what could we add as a bylaw that we could put forth at the Maytown meeting? And that's really what I'm looking to do. And I'm just looking to the board for some support. And like, how do we start? We start digging in, what do other towns do? Maybe that's a place to start.
Yeah, if the board wanted to pursue that, certainly we get a hold of town council. I'm sure they have some, you know, something that we can work with.
So that's all I was thinking. It'd be nice to add that. And Kelly said, yeah, we don't. It's a good pickup. You know, we're emailing back and forth. So it's all is just to look into. I don't want to get rid of them. I love them, you know, but they offer great service.
Well, like when you have concessions like the carnival, I know the Board of Health had to come down and look at their food station's there, like it can't,
That,
like,
and that happens with like, whether it's the hot dog truck or the
Yeah.
pizza
Right.
place, they
Yeah.
have to get those
right,
permits.
so it should be.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be
It's
that
more, I
hard.
think what you're referring to is more coming in, letting us know they're there, but parking, trash,
Yeah,
circulation, those types of things, making sure that, and we can
that's all.
get a hold of town council and ask if they've got some sample bylaws from other communities.
That's all.
They have.
And if it comes back that, we, this is not necessary, then fine, we move on, but. That's all.
All right, anything else on the new business? All right, Dennis, town administrator's report.
Few items, Hartford Avenue, working hard on the redesign. We've got our engineers working on that. WS is paying for the engineering associated with it from the southbound ramp to the Cedar Hill, actually the Arrowhead intersection with Hartford Avenue. So it goes beyond Cedar Hill because there'll be some widening. So that's something that we've been working with Representative Soto. We've had some meetings with the district on. It does not include the bridge, but at least it's a start. It's about a $7 million start conservatively as far as what it would cost for widening lanes. We're at the point of being at about 25% design complete, and 25%. Really what it means is they pretty much nailed down the scope of the project, and usually what you have is a 25% hearing if the state's involved, like the TIP project. The state came down, some of you may have been here when they held their 25% plan review. That's not required for this project. We haven't identified a funding source yet. We are going to be pursuing MassWorks grant, as well as Representative Soto's looking at some other avenues, such as a line item or an earmark within the budget, which is always difficult. But on February 16th at 6 o'clock here in the Arcan meeting room, we are going to be hosting a meeting with the residents on Hartford Avenue that we will be looking at easements on their properties. It's always a very sensitive and important part of the project, because we are looking at some substantial easements. We did make it clear that this meeting has nothing to do with the 3 vacant homes. It has nothing to do with those. It's more widening associated with the project that we've been working on. So if more than 2 board members think you'd like to attend, we'll go ahead and post the meeting as a meeting of the Board of Selectmen if you like, if you think you'd be attending that.
When is this again?
It's 6 o'clock so next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. District Representative Highway District 3 will be here. The representative of the design firm will be here. Obviously, Don DiMartino will be here. I'll be here. So 6 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and post it. Just the Board of Selectmen will convene to hear discussion on Hartford Avenue roadway improvements. Be as simple as that. And you can open up the meeting, and you just here for that way. If there is discussion amongst the board members, you can do it legally, as opposed to worrying about you can't talk to each other or whatever. So we'll certainly do that. All right. And again, we have sent personal letters to those homeowners that will be impacted by this project, either with temporary easements or permanent easements. As I say, there is a widening on one side of the roadway that'll be substantial.
So there are about what, eight residents affected, Dennis?
I believe there are about 8 in addition to those 3 vacant homes. So in addition to those,
And the bridge doesn't look like it's up.
right now we're still pursuing another avenue for the bridge, but right now it's not a part of this, just because the scope of it. What we want to do is achievable through a MassWorks grant, but the bridge is. We did get notice that we're getting a bridge done in Bellingham, but it's the bridge that goes over Maple Street. It's through the Deficient Bridge Program, and that bridge is about a $13 million project. So the one on Hartford Avenue would even be much more substantial than that one.
Well, I know they were doing that, but just can't believe that. I
The one
guess
on
they
Maple
inspect. I'm sure they inspect the one Maple Street's in worse shape than the one that's in Hartford
Exactly,
Ave.
and that's why they're doing it. That's
Yeah.
why they're doing it. It's made the deficient bridge list of the
Yeah.
state. Community Development Block Grant, you just accepted it, but it's an $800,000 grant. You've got kind of talking points in there from Paula Stewart. So great job by Paula. These programs are more and more competitive, and it allows us to keep a program alive. I know she mentioned for 20 years, we've had the program initially started in Bellingham in 1985. We weren't funded a few years over the last, whatever that is, 37 years. But for the most part, we've been fortunate to get funding most years. And it's a program that provides work for low and moderate income families that own homes. So it's been a
So
great
so we
program.
did some work up by Larry's at one point on sidewalks with that. Can
We did, and now
that be used in the schools?
we actually have to identify a region of town that meets the low moderate income criteria. Some of it can be used, there's two avenues. This particular grant, we have targeted the low and moderate income. The one where we did the ones up by Larry on North Main Street, Larry's, were not targeted for low and moderate income. This one will be more in the Hartford Street. We actually got 2 grants for Hartford Street sidewalks, so we're gonna have to do some juggling there to figure out how we can reallocate funds. The Complete Streets gave us funding for sidewalk improvements on Hartford Street, put crosswalks that maybe are raised to make it much safer there. And the other thing that we want to do is try and improve the handicap access on those sidewalks down there on Hartford Street. In Trenton Street, it's just an update. I know we said in March we're going to notify the residents that came in before us, but I gave you some information from our engineers, and they did raise some concerns with stop signs. I know we did put them up there, but that's just food for thought there. We're struggling. I know you got emails from Betsy with regard to the beaver situation. She's done a fair amount of work on that. Nothing definitive yet, but just to say that we are working on it. We've got some information on both topics. So we'll continue to work on that. Finally, I'll be requesting an executive session at the conclusion of this meeting to update the board on contract negotiations with various bargaining groups, which are all up at the end of June.
Okay.
Having exhausted our agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
2 executive sessions.
2 executive sessions.
Hold the board to see if we'll go into
Do you have a
executive
second
session.
motion? Second?
Second.
Okay. Is that somebody first it?
I didn't hear a
First,
First from Mrs. Grant. Second from Mrs. Grant.
Hillary's going to poll the
All those
board.
in favor, say aye.
Hillary's
I
going to
gotta
poll
poll
the
the
board.
board to go
Oh.
into executive session. Mrs. Grant,
yes.
Mrs. McNulty.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Gauss.
Yes.
We won't be having any comment at the conclusion of the executive session.
All right.
Okay.